All right. We are chapter 57, obviously, is after chapter 53. This is we had two chapters, 54 and 55, that, or so what chapters. The servant has come, so what? So we have one chapter that's basically for Israel, another chapter basically for the Gentiles. So that's 54 and 55. In 56 and 57, we're starting to look at the world as it is post-servant. And Isaiah is looking at it with a purpose in mind. He's describing the world that you and I live in, the world that the church lives in. We didn't have a church till we had a servant, right? He's looking at what it's like to be in this world now, and he's doing that on purpose. He's doing it because he wants to talk to us about what the Mashiach, the anointed one, is going to accomplish when he comes. The servant has already come from the perspective of the book of Isaiah. As we sit here in chapter 57, the servant has already come. But there is coming another one, and he is known as a Mashiach, an anointed one. I talked a lot about the four servant songs in the middle part of the book. Now we're in the last part of the book. In the last part of the book, there are four Mashiach songs. They correspond to the four servant songs. If you look at, there's a chart, I'll try to make that chart available so you can see it a little better. We've looked at it here before. The characteristics that are given of the servant in the servant songs are identical. They are exactly the same. They are precisely exactly the same. They use the same Hebrew words. There is no question but what Isaiah is leading you and I to understand, that this Mashiach is the same person as the servant. This anointed one that's coming is the same person as the servant. Does that jive with what we know this side of the cross? We know that Jesus is coming back, right? The one that comes back is going to be the same one who was the servant. God himself came and lived with us, lived a sinless life, died for us so that we can return to live with God. But now Isaiah is picturing what's left in this world after the servant has come and before the Mashiach comes. And when you and I come to understand this world that we live in, we will see from what Isaiah has written that we need more than what the servant did. My salvation is not complete yet. I'm still living in a place of temptation. I'm living in a place where my life may be threatened because I'm a Christian. I'm living in a place where all sorts of things work against me and are intended against me. I'm living in enemy territory. Does that sound familiar? I'm living in a place that doesn't like me because I'm a follower of Christ. We joked this morning, somebody said, Lou said, I've lived in the right century, I'm just living too long. What Lou meant by that was he liked the early part of his life because we lived in what we called a Christian nation. We lived with values that were Christian values. We were a very different nation for most of Lou's life than what we are now. Lou's not happy with what is going on right now. Nor is Chris, nor is Deke, nor is anybody out there in the Ethernet. We're coming to a place where it's getting real for us that the world around us doesn't like us. It's getting real for us that we're living in enemy territory more than it's ever been in our lifetimes, and we don't like it. I'm with you, Luke. I don't like it. I'm with you, Deke. I don't like it. And we're trying to figure out, what's this mean? How do I respond to it? And in particular, we're sitting here, we're wondering if this is the end days, the end times, but in other parts of the world that we're living in, Christianity is growing like crazy. Well, I've said this before, in Korea, 40 years ago, it was 2% Christian. Now it's 40% Christian.
Wow.
Yeah. What's happening in China? If China follows the same path that Korea has followed, and it looks like they are, all the indications are that the same thing's happening in China that happened in Korea. By the middle of this century, there will be 2 billion Christians in China. Huh? That doesn't feel like the world I'm living in. And so maybe my perception of this being the end days, maybe that needs to be a little bit tempered. Maybe I need to understand that I don't have any birthright when it comes to being in the easy place as a Christian. And maybe it's my turn to watch my friends be martyred. Maybe it's my turn to be martyred. I don't like that. I'm not okay with that. But I need to get a picture, don't I, of this world that I'm living in. And so Isaiah's painting this picture for me, and you're going to recognize the world that we're living in. As he describes it, you're going to say, oh yeah, I know about that. You're going to say, oh, that's why. You're going to feel at home in the picture that Isaiah is painting of the world. And then you're going to see, oh yeah, I need somebody to come back and put an end to evil. I need somebody to take away the temptation. I need somebody to deal with these people who want to kill me. We need that, don't we? Is it okay to kill Christians? I don't want to live in that world. It's not okay. So suddenly now I'm post-servant, but I'm living between the servant and the Mashiach's return. And so this matters. What Isaiah is going to do is paint this picture for us, paint the picture of the Mashiach who's coming, and then paint the picture of what it's going to be like after the Mashiach comes. When we read the last couple of chapters of the book of Isaiah, you're going to swear you're reading the book of Revelation. You're going to say, oh, this is the New Jerusalem. And it is. It is exactly the New Jerusalem. So now Isaiah is living 700 years before Jesus is even born. And not only is he painting a picture of what Jesus did on the cross, he's painting a picture of what Jesus is going to do in our future. Who must Isaiah have been that God entrusted him with these visions? And how important is it for you and I to understand history and where we live in it in order that we might understand how to live in it in these days. So Isaiah, that's a big part of what this third part of the book is about. It's to help you and I as the church know what to do as we sit here waiting for the Mashiach to come back. Oy. So there's a lot that we have to learn here in there. Go ahead, Dee.
You know, we think we maybe are in times, something like I'm just thinking about what the Hebrews thought when they decided not to go into the promised land, or when the judges came along, or when Assyria took over the northern kingdom, or when the southern kingdom fell and we watched the temple of the, and here we are, we think America, but are we sitting here watching the cities burn? Is that right? this is not the moment, this is just one moment in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah.
And if the church in China or South Korea is growing that much, it looks like that's the next phase. We're just going to be a part of the history.
It does look that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Well, let's let Isaiah talk. 56:9 through 12, the last verses that we looked at before Christmas, examined the lives of the leadership of Israel. If you remember, it was focused on one of the things we noted was it was focused on their character rather than on their policies. It is their character that leads to the trouble. And so we wondered about the character of the leadership that we have. We thought about the character historically of the leaders that we've had. When I look back at Truman and Eisenhower, Dean Rusk, that generation of men, these were men of sound Christian character. These were men who were giants among men, not just because Eisenhower would have been a giant among men, whether he was elected president or not. Eisenhower was a giant of a man, as was Truman, as was Dean Rusk. As I watch, however, from the time of Eisenhower coming forward to the present day, what I think I see in the character of those various leaders that have come along in my nation is I see the character of the leader declining over time. Why is Marilyn Monroe singing happy birthday to Jack Kennedy? We fast forward to the 90s and we have a president who wants us to think about what the definition of is. Really? I'm supposed to believe this is a man of high character? And then I look at what's happened since then, and I see that the leaders that my country is electing are not men of character. I want to believe some are better than others, but if I'm honest, it's hard to look at the last few presidents and say these are men of great character. And so I've come to the point where I say to my close kin that we keep electing the presidents that we deserve. And boy, God forbid that continues. So now we've looked at these verses that talk about the leadership's character. And now we're going to come down out of the palace. Our perspective now is not going to be in the palace looking at the leadership. We're coming down out of the palace and we're going to look at things in the marketplace. We're going to look at life at street level. We're going to look at where there's people like you and me. So Isaiah's analysis is going to reveal to us that more than forgiveness of sins is needed to effect real salvation. My salvation is not complete yet. There are forces of wrong that need to be dealt with in our world. Is the Mashiach, when he comes back, is he going to deal with all the evil in the world? There's going to come a day when he casts the devil and all who are with him into that lake, that fiery burning lake. Is he going to deal with the evil? He is. He's going to put an absolute end to all that evil. It's going to stop. It's not going to stop until he stops it, but he is going to stop it. Is that true? I'm still under temptation in this world. Is that going to be removed when the Mashiach comes back? If there's no evil in the world, I'm not going to be tempted to evil. That's part of what living in heaven is going to be about, is we're going to live in a place where nobody offends anybody else. I'm not going to hurt anybody's feelings anymore. I'm looking forward to that because I have a history of hurting people's feelings. Nobody's going to hurt my feelings. I'm looking forward to that too. Threats to life itself. Do we live in a place? Are we living in a world that threatens our very lives because we're Christians? Yeah, and we're coming to terms with that here in the US of A, aren't we? We're beginning to feel it as a real thing. You know, that Voice of the Martyrs magazine that comes around, there's a couple of thousand people martyred in our world every month. A couple of thousand. I don't hear much about it, but it's true. Maybe there's coming a time when some of those 2,000 that are martyred every month are going to be from our ilk, from our place. Maybe that's what's happening here. The lives of God's people as we live now after the cross, after the servant, call for acts of judgment and rescue from God. As I look around in the world that I live in, I need more for my salvation to be completed. It's not going to be complete till I get to heaven. It's not going to be complete until evil is dealt with in my dark heart. We need more. And do we need what Jesus did at the cross? Absolutely. Is it the most important decision I'm ever going to make? Who was Jesus? Absolutely. But now that I'm part of his family, now that I'm part of the gang, I come to realize that we need some more for our final salvation to be completed. And Isaiah is going to paint that picture for us so that we understand who the Mashiach is, why we need him, and what he's going to do, what all he's going to be able to accomplish because of who he is. God is going to, Deke and I were talking about what it means to have a heart that's longs for eternity. We were talking about that this morning. We were made to live in a place where there isn't sin. We were made to live in God's presence for eternity. That's who people are. That's why God gave us his image within us. We are meant to be people with God in heaven, and we long for that. It breaks our hearts that sin corrupts our world, that sin corrupts our minds, that sin corrupts who we are. We long for that place where we have the kind of relationships with each other that the Father and the Son and the Spirit have with each other. We are meant to be in that place. We're meant to be part of that joy that they've had forever. And this world is not bringing me joy these days, guys. It is not. And that's an honest perception. I'm looking at the world around me and it don't make me happy. It makes me a little fearful sometimes when I forget how big God is. When I forget that God can deal with the Assyrian army overnight. When I forget that God can deal with however many giants are in the promised land. As long as I remember who God is, I'm okay in this world. But this world does not point me to God day by day. This world points me everywhere but God. And it's a fight for me. And it's a fight for you to keep your eyes focused where they need to be focused for us to be who we ought to be. I need that Mashiach to come. I need God to put an end to this nonsense because I wasn't made for this. I was made to live with God, and I know it. Lou's talking about he's living too long. He's looking forward to getting to a better place. And that's an honest assessment. he means it.
If we hadn't been living through this time now, my focus wouldn't be so much on the next place. It'd be, I'm pretty content here. I'm satisfied here. So,
Yeah. So the central theme of the passage is the contrast between the Lord's family and the family of the prostitute. As we look, as we come down to street level and we look around in the marketplace, what we see is two kinds of people. What we see is the descendants of the woman who are on the snake side of the genealogy. You remember the genealogies, all those genealogies back there in Genesis. And we have the other side who are descendants of Abraham, descendants of Christ these days, but who are people of God. And so as it was when the genealogies got started, so it is now. Isaiah is going to tell us and picture for us. He's going to look around and he's going to see that the Lord's family has to live in this place where prostitute family lives, where the evil lives. And so, this make me especially happy. So 21 verses here in chapter 57. They begin and end with an understanding of what peace is. There is real peace available to the righteous. I just talked about how difficult it is to live in this place, and now I'm telling you that Isaiah says there's real peace available for us. But he also says that peace is not possible for the wicked. So those two things bracket this chapter. The peace that's available to the righteous and the peace that is not going to be there for the wicked. So that's the beginning and the end of this chapter. In between, we have the prostitute and her family and the Lord and his family. So it's an organized presentation. You have to sort of get back from it a little while to see the organization, but it's there, as it always is in Isaiah's writings, as it always is in all of the prophets' writings. It's as if somebody other than a human being wrote this, as if. So there's our outline. We're going to look at the prostitute and her family this morning. If we get there, it'll be all the way up through verse 14. And then we'll save the Lord and his household probably for next time. So 57, 1 and 2. These lines alternate between singular and plural subjects and verbs. And the way to say that is to wait till we get to where we actually see it so that you'll understand what that means. The intent of that is that the general truth of the safety and peace of the righteous is applied to each individual. It's not just that the righteous will get good things. It's that each righteous person gets good things. Each iteration, each one of us that is one of Christ's gets good things. The church gets good things, but each of you, each of us gets good things too. So, and also in those first two verses, the death/disappearance of the righteous. And then, boy, is this going to engender some thinking. Often misunderstood by the world and sometimes even by the sufferer, is really a merciful gathering of the righteous that they might avoid the coming trouble. Sometimes the righteous are gathered to God to get them out of the trouble that we have in this world. It's okay for us to die. It's actually sort of a good thing for us to die. I get to live in heaven instead of living here. How can anything be wrong with that? Nothing can. So when scripture says, and when you hear the pastor say it, you're at somebody's funeral, that the death of the Lord's children is precious to him. Part of what that means is that God has gathered this one to a place that's really, really good. And that one now is celebrating with God this joyous, wonderful place that is no longer this place. Isaiah wants us to come to terms with, God wants us to come to terms with the fact that we are really attached sometimes to this world, and we really ought to let go of that and find our joy and our hope in what's coming next in our future. I had a buddy in New Orleans who was a bigger than life kind of guy. He was a merchant marine captain. He captained those big ships that carry those containers across the earth to different places. You guys may or may not know. I don't know how much you know about the merchant marine. Those ships are usually crewed by people from third world countries who don't speak English. There is usually one guy there that speaks English because the captain has to be able to tell them what's going on and what they need to do. But for the most part, the captain of that merchant marine ship is living in a world which he governs. And he will tell you point blank, there are moments when I must come nose to nose with that guy and the 60 guys who are standing behind him. And I must say to them, you're going to do it my way, or you're going overboard. Understand? This is my ship. We're going to do it my way. And if you're not prepared to do that, don't even take that ship out into the ocean. Don't even sit up there on the bridge of that ship. Don't pretend that you're the captain of that ship. But that guy's, and this is a guy who was a former alcoholic. This is a guy who struggled with things his whole life, and he became a Christian, and his lungs were infected by this air that he breathed going back and forth between here and the rest of the world. And over a period of time, the medicine that they gave to get rid of that lung infection, he grew immune to. And so he lived hospital visit to hospital visit, knowing that one of these times when he goes in the hospital, they aren't going to be able to take care of him. I was there, the day the doctor came in and said to him, there's nothing more we can do. And the doctor started hemming and hawing and beating around the bush. And my buddy looked the doctor right square in the eye and said, if you're trying to tell me I'm going to get to see my buddy Jesus, don't even get sorry about it, because I'm not sorry. I'm looking forward to it. And he sat there for the remaining almost 3 weeks of his life, and he witnessed everybody that walked into that room. And I'm telling you, people flew in from all over the world. People that he had known, people whose lives he had impacted, people he had sponsored in AA, people he had helped one way or another since he had become a Christian. Hundreds of people came in those 3 weeks, and every single one of them got to hear from his lips, man, I'm going home. Man, I'm going home. Finally, I'm going home. I'm going to see Jesus. I'm going to get there ahead of you. And he would chuckle, say, I'm getting there ahead of you. That's the kind of departure I want to have when I leave this world. He'd let go of. You know, if you've been an alcoholic, you've seen how hard life can be. If you've been out there at sea and you've had those 60 guys come at you and you're the only one on your team, he's seen how hard this life can be. When you've had to dump cargo overboard because of the storm you're in. And then you have to tell people that you've done that. You've seen how hard life can be. When you waited years, a hospital visit after hospital visit, for this to finally end. And you've come to understand that when it finally ends, that's going to be a really good thing. That's going to be good. Then you've gotten to where we ought to be as a people. I ought to be able to witness to every unsaved person that knows me. I ought to be able to say to them in my dying days, geez, I wish you'd join me. Because what I'm about to enter into is something that's better than anything I have ever seen, better than anything you and I can imagine. Please stop trusting yourself and trust Jesus. That's the only way you get to where I'm going. Please enter into the joy that I have. 57:1, the righteous man perishes and no one lays it to heart. Devout men are taken away while no one understands. The death of the righteous one. The righteous man perishes and no one lays it to heart. The righteous man is singular. He perishes, that's a singular verb. Devout men, men are plural, are taken away. That's a plural verb. This is that notion that it's not just for us as a group, it's for us each. The righteous man perishes and no one lays it to heart. Why does all this take place? Or because the righteous man is taken away from calamity. We are taken out of this place where we will have trouble, and we're going to a place where Jesus has overcome the things of this world. Righteous man is men of unfailing love. Righteous man is really an awkward translation of men of unfailing love. It's that chesed word. It's that word in the Old Testament that pictures God's steadfast, never-ending love that you can't escape. It's that love. It's the men who have experienced that who are the righteous men. Until you've experienced that love that comes only from God, you can't be a righteous man. So no one understands has overtones of 53:8. We're going to look back for a second at a verse in the servant song. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. As for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. I really hate that translation. It says, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living. Before I understood this verse in Hebrew, I struggled with what this verse means. What does it mean, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living? What it means is, who understood. By oppression and judgment, he was taken away. And as for his generation, as for the people who follow him, which one of them understood that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people? Which one? Who understood? And the whole servant songs teach us that nobody understood, that it's not able to be understood until God reveals it to us. The servant song starts out this way. It starts out by saying, you can't understand this until God reveals it to you. That revelation must take place before you can understand what Jesus has done. Before you can understand that the reason he was put to death is for my sins. God has to do something in you before you will understand that. That's what Isaiah says here. Whew. The first taken away is plural, and the last taken away is singular. See the righteous man who begins up here? It's the same righteous man, singular, who ends it, but devout men are plural. So it's the plural and the singular. When you read this in Hebrew, it gets all jumbled up because of the switch from singular to plural and back again. Until you stand back from it and realize that what's being said here is that righteous men, yes, each righteous man, each one is going to experience this. The real truth about the death of the righteous man is that it is a deliberate taking away in order to be spared from evil. When you and I die, we are taken out of this evil place, and we are put in a place where there is no evil. We are welcomed back into the presence of God, and we ought to be able to celebrate that. 2 Kings 22:20. Therefore, behold, I will gather you to your fathers, and you shall be gathered to your grave in peace. And your eyes shall not see all the disaster that I will bring upon this place. And they brought back word to the king. Prophet tells the king that you're going to be taken away. Verse 2, he enters into peace, and they rest in their beds. He, that's individual, that's singular, enters into peace. They, plural, rest in their beds, who walk in their uprightness. Singular and plural. All of us and each of us. Isaiah wants every reader to hear that if you come here, this will apply to you. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you've done. Your history is irrelevant once God touches your life and saves you. Can a murderer be saved? Yes. Can a murderer make it to heaven? Yes. Is he going to have to deal with some judgment because of what he did? Yes. But can he be pulled out of all of the evil and placed into the presence of God? Yes. Yes, he can. I can get there. I know how evil I was. I know how many people I offended and hurt and just simply walked over the top of before I became a Christian. I know how miserable I was and what a wretched individual I was. But Isaiah says that if I come to this one, I can be rescued. I can be saved out of that. Doesn't matter what my heart says to me. It matters what the Lord says. And that's something really important for us, because we were all sinners. Every one of us has a past.
You know, earlier this morning, I was reading in Matthew, Christ was talking about, talking to the Pharisees, and he said, there was a son who his father told him to go out and do something. And he said, no, I won't. And he did, he left. And the other son said, no. He said, yes, I will. He said, the first son eventually said he wouldn't do it, went out and did it. The son that said he would do it didn't do it. And which one did it? The will of the Father.
The will of the Father.
The will of the Father. You know, the Pharisee said, well, his first son who said he wouldn't do it, but did it. And the point was, that's the key. Who eventually does
The will of the Father.
the will of the Father.
Let me build a little chain for you here with another parable. The prodigal son goes out, takes his father's stuff, goes out, lives a riotous life, and comes back. And the father, what's the will of the father? Welcome him back. To welcome him back, to put a robe on him, to put a ring on his finger, to have a feast with the fatted calf. The older brother, the other son, won't even go into that party. Is he he claims he's always done what the father asked him to do. But in this moment, is he doing the will of the Father?
No.
No, he's not. You and I, as sinners, needed a father who was willing to welcome us back. And we needed somebody at that party. We needed an older brother who would do the will of the Father, who would welcome us into that, back into the inheritance. My older brother is Jesus. The firstborn of God is Jesus. The one who leads the rest of us into heaven is our oldest brother, Jesus, who spent his life sneaking away and praying, who spent his life doing everything he could to find the will of the Father and do it. That's the older brother I needed. And you know what? I can see in myself that I could never have been that older brother. The older brother is a self-righteous joker. We've come to that understanding. You've heard that parable enough that you know that that's the case. And in his self-righteousness, he is selfish and will not share with his brother. The place where we're going is a place where the older brother does the will of the Father. It's a place where, in spite of my sin, I'm going to rule with Christ. In spite of my life, I'm going to be welcomed into that family. I'm going to be adopted. There's a George word for you, into that family. And part of that adoption can take place because my older brother has taken care of everything that needs to get done. He has done the will of my Father to get me there. It's just another perspective. It's another way to hold up this jewel and turn it and see another aspect of the salvation that is available to us. I now, in my now family, I have an older brother who was willing to do the will of the Father. And everything that we do as a family is going to reflect the will of the Father when I get to that place. Oh, what a glorious place. Which one did the will of the Father? That's the answer that we need to. How do I do the will of the Father? Is the question I want to ask myself right at this minute. How do I do the will of the Father? I'm going to have to pray a little more than I usually pray. I'm going to have to read my Bible a little more than I read it. I'm going to have to trust him more than I already do.
Why do I keep stumbling?
How come I can't do the will of the Father? How come I can't? And in that moment, when I say to myself, how come I can't do the will of the Father? Suddenly I can realize how much I needed somebody who would do the will of the Father. Oh, what an incredible thing the Word of God is. He enters into peace. Isaiah 53:5. Here we are back in the servant song again. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. We enter into peace. Why can we enter into peace? Because he was crushed for our iniquities, because he was pierced for our transgressions. I have a future in glory because my older brother did the will of the Father. The bodies of our loved ones, whether on their deathbed or lying in the grave, picture for us the unbroken rest into which they have entered. When you go to the viewing and the body is there before you, you will never see that body twitch or struggle or fight for anything. That body is separated now from this world, and it has entered into a kind of rest that breaks our hearts because they're no longer with us. But if we understand the rest they've entered into, we can rejoice for them. We can celebrate for them. We can long for that moment when we will be with them in that place. This salvation stuff is incredibly valuable, incredibly rich, incredibly awe-inspiring, what God is willing to do for us. The death of the Lord's people is purposeful and leads to entry into peace and rest. Uprightness here, those who walk in their uprightness is an ethical term which pictures a life that is right with God. They enter into peace, they rest in their beds, who walk a walk that is right with God. Those who walk a walk that is according to the will of the Father. Those who walk the walk that is longing for the will of the Father. Here I am in this world. Here I am still sinning. The servant's done what he's done for me, and I've appropriated it. I've received it as my own, and yet I'm still stuck in this world. What gets me out of here? Only the family that's doing the will of the Father. Only the Father can get me out of here. Only my oldest brother who has done the will of the Father can get me out of here. I can try like fury to walk in uprightness, and I might accomplish it for 1/10 of a second before my evil mind takes over again. Gosh, I need that older brother who has done the will of the Father for me. I need the older brother who sits with the Father at the feast and says, "It's okay, Dad, I took care of his sins. It's okay. He's ours. I want to be with him at this feast," is what our older brother says. I want to welcome him in and give him a robe and a ring, and I want him to rule with us.
You know, one of the most heartfelt and I think pleading moments of an individual's life is in Paul, when he says, why can I not do what I want to do? But why do I do what I don't want to do? You can't do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Those are plain. He has feeling, so much feeling.
Yeah. He summarizes pretty quickly, doesn't he, what it is to live in this world.
Right. That's it.
Between the servant and the Mashiach.
And he just can't do it.
Grit our teeth and try as we will, just can't get there. And it is, I think there's real value in that we get to a place where we understand that this place, I don't belong here and I don't want to be here. I want what's over there.
That's hard to say though, because you think, don't you value life? Don't you value, it looks like it's a conflict, but it's not.
Yeah.
Seems like a selfish opinion of idea that you want.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave my kids, my wife, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
But I can have peace knowing that they're gonna come along.
Yeah. It's
What an irony. Ironically. Didn't you say, why did you set it up this way, Lord?
yeah,
Well, he didn't.
we messed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we messed it up and he's gonna fix it. And in his fixing it, in his rescuing us, when we get over to the other side and we're with all the other people who have been rescued, for all eternity, every single one of us is going to be filled with joy at what the Lord has done for us. Every one of us is going to sing his glory, praise him and worship him and be filled with joy because of what he's done for us. All of the angels, all of the created beings of all eternity, however many there may be, are going to see how good God is when they look at us, because God redeemed us. We spit in God's eye. And while we were still sinners, when we were still spitting in his eye, when we were still intent on doing things our own way, he died for us. What a glorious and incredible thing God has done. And that's what we're going to celebrate for eternity. Well, I've gotten through 2 verses. Didn't I do good? And here we've used up our time already. I've used up our time. So we'll pick up here at the prostitute and her family. We'll pick up there next time. So what do we learn this morning? And what do we do with it now that we're pick up our heads and we're back in this crazy world?
What day is your surgery? What day do you go in for surgery?
Next Monday, the 16th. We got a wedding the day before. Andrew's getting married Sunday afternoon.
Wow.
We've got to drive to Charlotte on Friday to get a CT scan that they forgot that they needed. She won't do the surgery without it. We got to drive to Greenville and get ready for the wedding. Then we got to drive back to Charlotte on Monday.
Whirlwind.
We get to come home the next day, supposedly. So we lived in Charlotte, we could go home that day, she said.
That's amazing. That's out, you're gonna be outpatient.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the old days, they would have had you in the hospital for months.
They're gonna check me into a room because
What?
they're gonna go ahead and check me in because we live in Banner Elk rather than Charlotte.
Well,
Give you a night to recuperate.
At least we don't
is
see her
that
for
the
3
stent
months.
they're gonna put in?
Behind the right ear, she said. Somehow they drill a hole there, I guess, and get that stuff in there. You should grab them.
Hmm.
They make it.
Well, praise the Lord that we have the medical technicians and knowledge to be able to do something like this. And, you know,
Yeah.
in all these scary things, there's always a blessing.
When we met her,
You have to look for it.
she and her staff all look like